Heavenly Father, thank you very much for the privilege we have to be together again, to study your word. Abide with us through your Spirit. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Welcome again, dear friends, to our presentation. Our theme, Give Me the Bible only. Today's topic, the beast from the sea. But before we get there, perhaps just recap on what we did last time, or the previous studies we had together. We looked at Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. Now, Daniel 2 reflects that image of the dream which the king had. And in Daniel 7, we discovered that the vision that Daniel received there had the same content as that which he saw in Daniel 2. In Daniel 2, it was the head of gold, and Daniel 7, the lion with the wings, representing Babylon. Daniel 2, the breast of silver, and Daniel 7, the bear of Medo-Persia. Daniel 2, Greece, represented by the bronze thighs, and the same with the leopard with the four wings in Daniel 7, also representing Greece. And then the Roman Empire, represented by the legs of iron, and in Daniel 7, the beast with the 10 horns. We also discovered an amazing fact that the leaders of the Reformation knew exactly what stood in Daniel 2 and in Daniel 7. So this is not a new message. In actual fact, they engraved it in stone in Nuremberg in Germany on the municipal building. On the one side, you will see Nebuchadnezzar and the lion of Babylon. Next to him, Cyrus with the bear of Medo-Persia. On the other side of the building, Alexander the Great and the leopard with the four heads and the four wings. On this side, Julius Caesar with this beast with the 10 horns, and among the 10 horns, there sits this little horn with the face of a man. And Daniel 7 concluded, and that's where we stopped last time with our study. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now, today we're looking at a chapter in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, the first part of that chapter. And it deals with the beast from the sea. But before we start our study on the beast from the sea, I invite you to turn with me to Revelation 14. It's the chapter just after this one. And in chapter 14 of Revelation, we find what is commonly called the 3 angels' message. Now, what is the 3 angels' message? It's that message that contains God's last plea, God's last warning to mankind just before the second coming. And here in Revelation 14, verses 9 through 10, we find the most terrifying words in the Bible as part of the 3rd angel's message. We will be looking at these messages throughout our series, but let's just look at the 3rd angel's message today. 2 verses. Let's read them together. Revelation 14, 9 through 10. And the 3rd angel followed them, And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worships the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Now, if this is not the most urgent warning in Scripture, I would like to know what it is. I think this is the most terrible thing that can happen to anybody. And God warns the world just before the second coming, saying that they who follow the beast and receives his mark will be thrown into the lake of fire. They will be lost. In other words, dear friends, we are talking today about a life or death issue for every one of us listening, sitting here, watching. And the tragic thing about this is that the average churchgoer in our country does not even know who the beast is or what his mark is. And now God comes and he says it's a matter of life and death for us. And you won't know what the mark of the beast is if you do not know who the beast is. And then people say that God did not want us to understand the book of Revelation. Now, just think for a moment logically. If this is the most urgent message that has ever gone out to mankind on this earth, will God be fair? Will he be just? Will he be a God of love if he would withhold this information from us? If he does not make it clear to us? Will God tell us about this terrible consequences coming our way when you worship the beast and receive his mark and then turn around and say, but I'm not going to tell you who or what that is? And you won't be able to find out either. Sorry for you. Is this the God that we're worshiping? Is this the God of love? Of course not, my brother and sister. God never does something like that. It's not his character. And yet people handle him this way. And they say, you know what? Nobody will ever actually know who or what this beast is. And nobody can with surety say who the Antichrist is. And perhaps that's the tragic truth. That people have heard so many different and opposing theories and explanations that in the end they just said, you know what, nobody will ever really know. Let's forget about it. Let's go on with life. I'm not listening anymore. It's not important to me. Let's not tire ourselves with all this info. Let's go on with life. Now, my brother and sister, this is a dangerous position to take. Because the Bible talks about this power and then says that the whole world is going to follow this beast. The Bible refers to this beast in Revelation 13, Revelation 14, Revelation 15, Revelation 16, Revelation 17, Revelation 18, Revelation 19, Revelation 20. Does that alone not tell us that the Christian should make sure that he or she knows who the beast is? If you do not know yet, I can assure you that you will definitely know the truth after this presentation. The Bible will tell us very clearly who and what the Antichrist power is. this beast from the sea in Revelation. Now, through the years you must have known, or you must have heard it. You must have heard it that the Antichrist is, or was, Hitler. Or the Antichrist is going to be one or other American president. Here in the 1980s, there was a computer in Berlin. The name of the computer was the Beast, and everybody said that this was the Antichrist, and the Antichrist would use this computer to control the whole world. And every year, new books hit the shelves of the bookstores, and the idea of the Antichrist changes from time to time. But the Bible is very clear about this beast. This beast with the number 666. And if we want to answer this question, we need to ask God. Who will know the beast better than God will himself? And he does it through revealing the truth to us. You know, sometimes, dear friends, the truth does hurt. But think about it. In the long run, the lie hurts more. Ask me. It's very difficult to see and admit a deception or a lie that you've grown up with. It's very difficult. And God sends His messages of warning to us in these last days because He loves us. He knows that there are a multitude of deceptions and lies surrounding us today, and He wants the truth to shine through in His wish that no one will be lost, but that everyone should have eternal life. Just before we read Revelation 13, let's just recap on the last verse of Revelation 12, just before Revelation 13. We read this in Revelation 12, verse 17. And the dragon was wroth with the woman. In other words, the dragon was angry with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. John sees this woman and this dragon. There will be one lecture where we will specifically look at Revelation 12, where this woman and this dragon is seen in vision. The dragon, of course, is Satan. He is at war with everyone that wants to obey God. He's at war with every one of us believing that Jesus Christ is our Savior. His final goal is to sit on the throne of God and to be God and to be worshipped like God. But he knows that if he should come in here today and if he should say, listen, here I am, I'm Satan. Who wants to come home with me? Who wants to follow me? I don't think anybody would respond. But that's not how he does it. What does he do? Let's listen. Let's read about it. Revelation 13. And I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard. Have we heard that? Have we seen that before? Wasn't that what Daniel 7 was talking about? The beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. Amazing. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. We're reading in Revelation, not in Daniel. The dragon gave him his power, his seat, and his great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. Now verse 2 talks about the dragon, Satan of course, but he does not identify himself as Satan. He uses a beast, and in Revelation 13:8, the Bible states that all that dwell on the earth shall worship him. All that dwell on the earth shall worship him, the beast. But here's a catch now. Did you spot it? Let's read verse 2 again. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now think with me. When the multitudes of the world worship the beast, they are in actual fact worshipping the dragon while worshipping the beast. Because the beast receives his power, his seat, his authority from the dragon. It's clear that this beast or power will receive some kind of worship. And this means it will need to be some kind of religious power or figure. It will be a worldwide power. The Antichrist thus cannot be some individual which will rise somewhere on earth. It will be a power. Now, have you noticed it? Just as the Father gives his authority to the Son, Jesus Christ, so the dragon gives his authority to his son, the beast. I hope you saw this. God gives his authority to his son. The dragon gives his authority to the beast. The beast receives a deadly wound. The Son of God receives a deadly wound when he dies on the cross. And just as Jesus is resurrected from the dead, so this wound of the beast is also healed. Do you see the parallel between the dragon and the beast, the Father and the Son? Satan falsifies everything that God does. The Bible is clear, dear friends, that many who thought that they were on the right track will in actual fact be lost because they were misled and led astray and deceived. And that's why Satan hates the book of Revelation. That's why he calls it a closed book and says that you cannot understand the book. Why? Because he knows that the moment the book of Revelation opens up for the child of God, Satan, and his plan is exposed for what he really is. And that's why he says, do not tire yourself with this book. Ignore it. Get on with your life. And he's not stupid. His kingdom is a counterfeit kingdom of God. God's kingdom. He falsifies the doctrine surrounding the second coming of Jesus. He falsifies the doctrine on death and what happens when you die. He falsifies the doctrine regarding hell and how one is saved. He even falsifies the view on the Antichrist to say that the Antichrist will be some lone figure that will persecute Christians somewhere in the future and burn down churches. No, my dear friends. The Antichrist is the one that will appear as if he is God. And he will bring this counterfeit kingdom with him. He will place himself in the place of God, of Christ, where he has from the beginning aspired to be. Now let's try and identify this beast. Let's turn first to Revelation 17. In the first verse of Revelation 17 we read, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials or vessels, and talked with me, saying to me, Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great whore that sits on many waters." And then in the 9th verse of Revelation 17, "And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits." In Revelation 13, we read that this beast comes up from the sea. Now, what does the sea represent in prophecy? We've read that the last time. He said to me, "The waters which you saw where the whore sits are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues." Water in prophecy represents nations, multitudes of people. This beast therefore rises up where there are multitudes of people and nations. Now, the last time we discovered the little horn in Daniel 7. Now, when you look at the little horn of Daniel 7 and you put Revelation 13 next to it, you discover that the little horn power of Daniel 7 and the beast from the sea in Revelation 13 is in actual fact the same power. Both describe this power of which the Bible prophesies and of whom it says, "Do not worship his image, do not receive his mark." In other words, dear friends, if you can identify the little horn, you can in actual fact identify the beast from the sea. Now, from history, we've already discovered which power came up after 476 AD and uprooted 3 kingdoms, the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Goths. Let us now put something together. Let's start identifying this beast. "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn." This helps us to identify the power geographically. In other words, somewhere in Western Europe, out of the head of the 4th beast of Daniel, of course, the Roman Empire. The next identification, "And the 10 horns, out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them." After them. Now, Rome fell in the year 476 AD. This means this little horn power must rise after 476. So think about it. A small kingdom which rises or comes up in Western Europe after 476. And then there's another clue in verse 8. "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots." And history tells us that in actual fact this little horn did that. That the Heruli and the Vandals and the Goths were just wiped from history. A small kingdom that comes up in Western Europe after 476 who uproots 3 other nations. But then there's something else in verse 8. "Behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things." Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Here's something extra here. The eyes in the Bible is a symbol of godly insight, of godly intelligence. But this little horn has eyes of a man, not the eyes of God. This power is led by a man. This power is led by human intelligence, human leadership, human authority. All the other horns or powers are normal powers. But this power is different. This power has a single visible man that at all times talks on behalf of this kingdom. And then the fifth clue. He shall be diverse from the first. It will have a different character. Think about it. All the other kingdoms, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, all of them are normal political governments. But this power, this government, will be different. It will have a man at its head, and that man will govern and speak on behalf of the government at all times. Something about the way this power is governed, the way it came into being, the way it's structured, is diverse from anything that the world has ever seen, even up to this day. A small kingdom in Western Europe rising up amongst the others, rising up later than the other, one that uproots three kingdoms, who has a man at its head, and with a distinct, different government system. Now let's look at verse 8 again. And the mouth speaking great things. A mouth speaking great things. Now, verse 25 elaborates on that. He shall speak great words against the Most High. Now, what does that mean? And Revelation 13 gives us the detail of what's said here. And there was given to him a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. Blasphemies. Now the logical question is, what is blasphemy? Now we can sit here till midnight tonight and we can argue about what blasphemy means. But I think it's better that the Bible speak for itself. Is there a definition of blasphemy in the Bible? Yes, there is. In John 10:30, Jesus says, I and my Father are one. And then we read, then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. He answered them, many good works have I showed you from my Father. For which of those works do you stone me? And then the answer comes. The Jews answered him, saying, for a good work we stone you not, but for blasphemy. And because that you, being a man, make yourself God. When a man makes himself God, the Bible calls it blasphemy. In other words, the man at the head of this power will declare himself to be the representative of God on earth. He will take the seat of God on earth. And then the Bible has a second definition for blasphemy. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the sick of the palsy, son, your sin be forgiven you. And then the Bible says in verse 6, but there was certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, why does this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only? Now Jesus could forgive sins because he was God himself. He was God. But when a man comes and claims that he has the power to forgive sins, the Bible calls it blasphemy. In other words, the man at the head of this kingdom, this little power, this little horn, will claim to have the power to forgive sins. The next clue we find in Daniel 7:25. He shall speak great words against the Most High and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Now the original word wear out literally means to persecute, to haunt, to plague, to pester, to kill, to carry on a continuous vendetta against. This kingdom will wage war against God's people, will persecute them, will kill them. So let's try again. A small religious political power which arises after the 10 kingdoms in Western Europe, who will uproot 3 other kingdoms, a kingdom with a man at its head as sole leader, with a government totally different to all the other kingdoms, where this man claims to be God, claims to be God's representative on earth, has the power to forgive sins, and a system where the children of God is persecuted throughout the centuries. I think you've got the answer. But there's more. Daniel 7:25 says, he shall think to change times and laws. Now this cannot refer to human laws, because human laws change frequently. Every time a new government comes into power, they change the laws. This must refer to God's law, to the 10 commandments. This power, the Bible says, will think to change God's law, the 10 commandments. And then it says, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Now here God commits himself and tells us through this prophecy in Daniel exactly how long this power will be in power, how long it will reign over God's people. A time, times, and the dividing of time. Now how long is that? How long is that? It seems to be a riddle, but it's not really. We need not to speculate. We need not speculate. The Bible gives the answer. Now, to understand what is said here, or what is meant by it, we need to turn in our Bibles to Revelation 12. Let's read the 14th verse of Revelation 12. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Exactly the same terminology in Revelation 12 that is used in Daniel 7. A time, times, and half a time. How long is that? Well, the Bible gives the answer. Revelation 12, verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. In plain English, 1,260 days. 3 times 20. 1,260 days. Actually, it's not that difficult. A time represents a year, which is 360 days in prophecy. Times 2 years, 720 days. A divided time, or half a time, is half a year, it's 180 days. Add them together, the total is 1,260 days. 1,260 days. But now there's another key that we should consider in prophecy. And that is the day-year principle in Bible prophecy. Now what is meant by that? Well, exactly what it says. When you deal in prophecy in the Bible, and there's mention of a day in that prophecy, in actual fact, a year is implied. Now, how do we know that? Well, we know it because it's in the Bible. Revelation 13:5 just gives the same time period and calls it 42 months, which is also 3.5 years, which is also 1,260 days. Now let's turn to the day-year principle in prophecy. In Ezekiel 4, verse 6, we read, I have appointed you each day for a year. Each day for a year. And in Numbers It's actually spelled out. Numbers 14:34. After the number of the days in which you searched the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall you bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and you shall know my breach of promise. How long was Israel in the desert? 40 days. How long were they there? 40 years. 40 years. In other words, 1,260 days, in actual fact, represents 1,260 years. I've appointed you each day for a year. Now, the last identification of the Antichrist power we find in Revelation 13:8. And all that dwell on the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. This power will become a world power. It will influence the whole world. Now here we have all 11 identification marks of this end-time Antichrist power. And I hope we've taken it from the Bible. In actual fact, anybody can go to any library and spend some time there and establish for him or herself. In actual fact, it's a historical fact. There's but one religious political power today on earth that fits this biblical description, and God speaks to his children through the Bible saying, "My children, I love you so much that I need to warn you. There's going to be a certain power in the end time that will be so convincing that the whole world will follow it." Do not bow before it. Do not follow it. Do not accept its mark. I love you so much that I'm identifying it for you. But now, I need to emphasize it again. The Bible identifies a power, dear friends, a kingdom, a government, not an individual, a beast, a horn, a kingdom. Now, there's no doubt that all these identification points point to one power only. And that is the religious, political power, the headquarters of Rome, Roman Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church papacy power, where the Pope is the head of this power, this system. Did you know that the Pope was not only head of the church, that he's also head of a state, the state of the Vatican? He comes to the United Nations and he speaks to the United Nations, and people say, how does he have the right to speak to them? He's got all the right in the world. Because he's speaking there not on behalf of the church, he's speaking on behalf of the state, of the Vatican. Even all the countries' ambassadors have offices in the Vatican. But let's say it again. We're not talking about an individual. We're talking about a power. Remember that Luther was a Roman Catholic. Let's conclude. He rose up among the 10. Well, the papacy did rise in Rome, the capital of the ancient Western Europe. He rose up after the 10. Little horn rose up after 476 AD, to be specific, in the year 538 AD. A small empire, a little horn. The whole empire of the Vatican consists of only 108 hectares. And there it is, in the middle of Rome. You can cut out that little piece, the Vatican. a small empire. It would subdue 3 kings. Daniel 7:8. Historically, it's documented that the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Heruli was eliminated by the Vatican, the last being the Ostrogoths in 538 AD. It will have a man as head of this empire. Up until today, the Vatican has a man, the Pope, who represents and speaks for the whole church and reigns till death. So for a Pope to resign, like Pope Benedictus did a while ago, is quite out of the ordinary. Like Christ, the Pope must die up until his death. He must speak on behalf of this kingdom. He will be different from all the other kingdoms, diverse. All the other kingdoms were normal political kingdoms, but Rome is different. It's a religious political power dictated by the Pope as sole head and master. He shall speak words of blasphemy against the Most High. Now this is their own words. Seek where you will, through heaven and earth, and you will find but one created being who can forgive the sinner, who can free him from the chains of hell. That extraordinary being is the priest, the Roman Catholic priest. Yes, beloved brethren, the priest not only declares that the sinner is forgiven, but he really forgives him. He really forgives him. The priest raises his hand, he pronounces the word of absolution, and in an instant, quick as the flash of light, the chains of hell are burst asunder, and the sinner becomes a child of God. So great is the power of the priest that the judgments of heaven itself are subject to his decision. Catholic priest Michael Miller, page 78-79. The priest does really and truly forgive sins in virtue of the power given to him by Christ. In a Catechism, page 279. The Roman Catholic Church claims the pardon of God can only be obtained by sinners through the prayers of priests. There's the reference. Pope John Paul II on Tuesday told Roman Catholics to seek forgiveness through the church and not directly from God. In a major document on the need of confession of sin, the Pontiff laid down guidelines for the world's nearly 800 million Roman Catholics. By now it's more than 1 billion. On the purpose of confessing sins to the priest. The requirement for confessing sins through the priest is one of the fundamental principles of Roman Catholicism. Pope Francis issued an order for bishops to allow the priest to absolve the sin of abortion during the Jubilee year. Now that was on the 3rd of the 9th, 2015. The Jubilee year started in December 2015. And for this year, priests will have the right. Pope Francis said on Tuesday that all priests will have the ability to forgive the sin of abortion during the year of mercy only, starting on the 8th of December 2015. But for this year only. Abortion cannot be forgiven. But this year, it can. And the priest will have the ability to forgive the sin of abortion. Now, what does the Bible say? John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. No man comes to the Father but by me. There's one God, one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus. Now listen to the following. The Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but he is Jesus Christ himself, hidden under the veil of flesh. Catholic National, July 1895. Pope Julius, in an encyclical letter on the 20th of June 1894, page 304, "Thou art the shepherd, thou art the physician, thou art the director, thou art the husbandman. Finally, thou art another God on earth." Now, an encyclical letter is a very important document in Roman Catholicism. If the Pope speaks ex cathedra, as they call it, he would say that Mary ascended to heaven. And therefore, today, it is part of their doctrine that Mary also ascended to heaven. An encyclical letter is just below one of those ex cathedra sayings of the Pope. So what he says here is very important. It's not just a letter. It's a very special letter. Now, what does the Bible say? Paul is talking to the Thessalonians, and he says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." Listen carefully. "Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, all that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Any man claiming to be God is busy with blasphemy. "He shall wear out the saints of the Most High." Well, Pope John Paul II admitted in public that it was the Roman Catholic Church that was responsible for the persecuting of the Christians throughout the ages. Some historians claim that between 50 and 200 million people died in these terrible times. And the other day, Pope Francis asked the Waldensians for forgiveness. Pope Francis asked forgiveness yesterday for the Roman Catholic Church's non-Christian and inhumane treatment in the past of the Waldensians, a tiny Protestant movement the Vatican tried to exterminate in the 15th century. And history tells of Pope Innocent, who had thousands of Christians killed in the Spanish Inquisition. He would also think to change times and laws, the Bible says. Listen to this statement. "The Pope is of so great authority and power that he can modify, he can change and interpret even divine laws. The Pope can modify divine laws since his power is not of man but of God, and he acts as vicegerent of God upon earth with most ample power of binding and loosing his sheep. Peter and his successors have power to impose laws, both preceptive and prohibitive, power likewise to grant dispensation from these laws, to impose and to remit penalties. This judicial authority will even include the power to pardon sin." In their encyclopedia, volume 13, page 265. "He, the Pope, is not subject to them," the canons of the Church, "because he is competent to modify or to annul them when he holds this the best for the Church. We hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." Pope Leo in an encyclical letter. "We hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty." In convert Convert's Catechism of the Catholic Doctrine, page 49, the Roman Catholic Church admits that they changed the law of God. How did they change it? There's the Catechism. Well, there's the law as they changed it. First one, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Second, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Is that the second commandment? No, it's not. The second commandment says something else. But the second commandment said, you may not make any image and you may not bow before them. But that's a problem for this power, because they do make images and they do bow before them. So what happened to the law of God, the 10 commandments? They just took the second commandment out. And then we come to the 10th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. That's the 10th commandment. But now, because they took out the second commandment, they need to do something. They took the 10th commandment, they split it into two. And they made the 9th commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, and the 10th, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. Then we've got 10 commandments again. Now the last, he will reign a times, and a divided time. If this prophecy means anything, this needs to lead us to a conclusion. If this does not lead us anywhere, this whole prophecy is in jeopardy. Now we know that the papacy began when Virgilius was made Pope in the year 538. 538. We need to add 1,260 years to this date. And then when we come to that date, it has to make sense. We've got the day-year principle. We've studied that. So if we start with 538, when this little horned power was born, and he became Pope, Virgilius, we add 1,260 years to that, where do we arrive? The year 1798. What happened in 1798? Well, the French Revolution was in full swing. The people just had enough. Napoleon sent his general Berthier to Rome. He arrested the Pope, closed the Vatican. When was that? 15 February 1798. The papacy received a fatal wound. The Pope was taken away. He died in exile in France. All the property of the church was confiscated, and the public was convinced that Roman Catholicism was dead. Exactly as the Bible predicted in Daniel 7 and in Revelation. 1,260 years to 798, the end of the papacy. But now the Bible is on record that this deadly wound would heal, and that this power would regain the power. And in actual fact, the Bible says the whole world will wander after this beast. There's an illustration of someone who put it on a canvas, the Pope being led away in 1798. But now Revelation 13:3 says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast. The deadly wound was healed. Was that wound healed? Well, here's the San Francisco Chronicle. On the 11th of February 1929, front page article, Mussolini and Gaspari sign a historic Roman pact. Mussolini was the Italian general. Gaspari was the secretary of the Vatican, signing a historic pact. Mussolini giving the Vatican back to the Pope, reinstating the Pope in his full power as head of the church and head of the state of the Vatican. Isn't it strange? The world press saying this: the Roman question tonight was a thing of the past, and the Vatican was at peace with Italy in affixing the autographs to the memorable document, healing the wound. Extreme cordiality was displayed at both sides. The world quotes the Bible. The world sees something has happened here. The wound is healed. The church sees nothing. The church is blind. The Bible is very clear, dear friends. The Antichrist cannot be some lone figure somewhere in the future. It needs to be a power that moves through history as the Bible describes it. This was remarkable when I saw it the first time. No wonder John 17:17 says, Jesus himself praying for his disciples, sanctify them through your truth. Your word is the truth. Hope we see each other again with our next presentation, which will have the title, The Most Remarkable Prophecy in the Bible. That's my title for it. Hope we see you